Oh, hi. Man, it's good. We took a little bit of a break, in between like the previous episode and the episode before that, but now we're back into the swing of things. We're hitting it. We're hitting it on the regularly scheduled programming again, at least for now. I know I've talked about this for a while, but coming up in October there might be some wonky episode shifts, but I'll at least keep you updated on that. But we of course have, I guess, a couple of things to talk about. There have been a few developments in the world of Diablo that have been going on, since we last chatted, and we'll go ahead and just jump right into it. So, welcome to episode 218, Launches and Lawsuits. So you could probably guess a couple of the topics that we're going to be talking about tonight, which of course, I've got some Warhammer talk to go through and discuss on my weeks in gaming. Probably not the type of gaming that you were expecting, unless you're paying attention to me rant about Warhammer in last week's episode. Then obviously there's been some more developments in the ongoing legal troubles facing Activision Blizzard and Blizzard directly. We've got a couple of things to talk about, I guess, for Diablo 2 Resurrected, and we have a little tidbit of what's to come for Diablo 4. As I believe I mentioned it in last week's episode, though it might have been in the after show, and my memory isn't quite as good as it is. But over this past weekend, I'm sure that all of you were 100% on board. I had a Warhammer tournament that I went to. Oh, and there was that Diablo 2 thing. But on Sunday I went and participated in an Age of Sigmar tournament down in Plantation, and I was cocky, I was arrogant when I was talking, a couple weeks ago, because I was saying that, when I played in the 40K tournament, I was like, my hope was I was gonna go win one game. I'd go 1-2. I'd win one, lose two, come in towards the bottom, and everything would be fine. But for the Age of Sigmar, I was cocky, and I said, my goal is 3-0, which for some of the smaller 3-round tournaments, you can go 3-0 and not win, but come in second or third place, depending upon how many people that were there. But I went 3-0, only 2 people did, and I ended up being the victor because I demolished my opponents. I absolutely destroyed them. I feel a little bit bad because in the first round I was paired against a brand new player, only had a couple of games of Age of Sigmar that he's ever played, and he just had a list of the models that he had and was just borrowing stuff from other people in order to make it. And so it's just it's like the terrible thing, because it's not just like a pickup game, it is a tournament. There's some money on the line and some other stuff, so it's I'm not going to be a complete and total dickhead, and so I helped him through the game. I told him, it's well, these are the objectives that you want to try and score, these are the things that you want to try and push, this is what all of my models do, this is actually what I'm going to do on my turn. So when you go through to position that, you see how I have these things set up over here. This is my movement range. I'm gonna jump straight into your mid board and try and take out your shooting. That's my whole goal. So you probably want to put a couple of things in front of it and wrap it around, because I can actually hop over you and all those other types of stuff. I might have hit him with a little bit too much information, but essentially I ended up kind of playing myself because I was trying to coach him through everything. And it ended up, tabling him, which, if you're not familiar with Warhammer, tabling means I killed all of his models. Tabled him turn 3, and then just, quickly talked out the remaining 2 turns of the game, because it's there's no point in having to actually, play out the rest of the game again without your opponent. So we just talked it out about what would happen, because you can still play the game after, losing all of your models, and sometimes you can still win. But not in this scenario. The second game was against a much more seasoned opponent, but his list was it was just rock paper scissors. My list was crafted 100% to fight his army, in particular. And so it was table turn 3, and then just talked out the remaining couple matches, and it's just well, we've got 2.5-hour rounds and the game's done in an hour and a half, and so we got an hour to kill. And then the third game was against a very veteran opponent that had some really interesting tech in his list, some stuff I was not expecting. And it was some fun, really fun games, great opponents, great people. First time ever going through and playing at that community. It's less than an hour away from where I live. I rely a lot on Uber and public transportation and such, so it still is a little bit tricky to go and try and get down there. But it's something that I definitely want to go through, and they want to have like monthly tournaments. That's probably something I'm gonna start doing more and more. As if you pay any attention to me on Twitter, I talk about Warhammer a lot. I probably at this point in time I've been talking about Warhammer about as much, if not more so, than I do Diablo. But don't worry, Diablo still important to me, But it's just like, I don't know, I got that competitive itch, and it's something that I'm good at. So I've been going through and doing that, and I also played some Diablo 2 over the weekend as well. Yeah, but we'll talk about that one later. And as I continue to go through and promise, any updates or developments with the ongoing legal troubles at Blizzard is always going to be front and center on every single episode of the show. As at this point, I want to go through and also denote that I am a hashtag Diablo partner, that I have partnered with Blizzard, and I have received some compensation, not in monetary form, but like the key that I was using to play Diablo 2 over the weekend was provided by Blizzard. Thanks to them. They also sent me like a really cool art print, amongst other things like over the years and such. And with that, Blizzard do better. Because what is it? And since the last episode, we have went through and had some findings that the SEC is currently investigating Activision Blizzard. It's a little bit different because in the prior stuff that we had talked about, like the state of California's lawsuit is directed directly at Blizzard, not Activision Blizzard, but directly at Blizzard. But the SEC is investigating ATVI, the corporate entity, over workplace practices and disclosures. This one isn't so much like the discrimination lawsuits and other stuff going on, because it seems that they're trying to dig into any information the company has in pertaining to the employment separation agreements and communications that exist between senior executives at Activision Blizzard. So we don't really have a lot of details because there's no suit that's been filed. They're just announcing that there's like this ongoing investigation, of which a part we have learned that Bobby Kotick, Bobby Blue Eyes, has been directly served with a subpoena in relation to this. As part of that, we also learned that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, had a ongoing investigation with Activision Blizzard as well. And that is, similar to the state of California's lawsuit, but this is the federal agency, which is then I think it was just like a couple days ago, like 2 or 3 days ago, they formally announced that they are filing a lawsuit against ATVI because their private negotiations that they had been having behind the scenes as part of their investigation into Blizzard about, quote, multiple allegations of gender-based discrimination and harassment, end quote. Those talks had broken down, and so it's no longer things that they were trying to work in behind the scenes, and so they publicly filed a lawsuit, and then like an hour later announced that they had settled it for $18 million, which that's just weird ever so slightly. Like, just, it's like we had private negotiations that went through and crumbled, and so we're publicly claiming that we're filing a lawsuit, and we're settled. Thanks everybody for the press releases. It's so strange. And then the whole thing, like, I know that there's like certain limitations with which that they have to bring damages against them, and I think like the EEOC cases against companies maxes at like 300,000 for like sexual harassment claims or something like that. And so like the $18 million that's went through and is set aside as part of this settlement, only covers about, if they were to be awarded like maximum, the maximum penalties, is only about 60 claims, and this goes back to 2016 as part of this lawsuit. And so that's over the last 5 years, like 60 claims. And it's to cover all employees, any employees. So you're talking, that's going to be a hell of a lot less, because now they have to go through the process of going and getting people to then like submit their claims and all this other types of stuff. And every person that does is going to then shrink the amount that other people do. And then also it seems that, this one, I haven't seen the document directly, so I am only going off of what other people have said, but it seems that in the documents that's required in order to sign up, in order to receive funds as part of the settlement, waivers your entitlement to any other damages from other ongoing, legal suits, including, the suit that Blizzard employees themselves brought against Blizzard, for retaliation in effect to the better ABK and the walkout and other things, as well as potentially the California lawsuit that they have going on against the discrimination, sexual harassment and other things that were going on. So there seems to be some gray area that if you accept any of the money coming out of this particular lawsuit, is then letting them off the hook in relation to other legal things. I'm not 100% on that one, and so, but again, I'm just repeating something else that I had seen without fully understanding it myself, and so I just want to put that stipulation out there. But that one definitely seems very odd. And then even then, like the whole, like the 18 million, like only being able to cover, like, in the grand scheme of things, so few cases, when just to put $18 million into comparison, because maybe it seems like a lot, but not really. In 2020, Activision Blizzard reported over $8 billion in revenue. Activision Blizzard also, in one of the most recent financial statements, has over $5 billion in liquid assets. That's cash and stocks that they can readily sell. Not their own individual company stocks, because there's a whole bunch of, SEC regulations and stuff. If they were to go through and sell their own controlling shares with which to raise revenue or capital. But they just have like $5 billion sitting around that they can do anything that they want with. And then also, finally, like one last little comparison, since we're talking about employment and wages and all that, a certain Bobby Blue Eyes received $155 million in compensation in the year 2020. Just to, put it into perspective. That's... So basically, they're setting aside, like 15% of Bobby's paycheck last year to take care of every person that's ever worked at Blizzard since 2016, and not just Blizzard, but Activision Blizzard, all of their subsidiaries and such. So, so it's like in comparison, I think I saw someone that hashtag did the math, and it comes out to, like, if you made $50,000 last year, it's the equivalent of being fined $100. So, I mean, in all honesty, it's like it's not even that. Because if you make $50,000 a year, you might still feel the sting of $100 a little bit. But, like, when you've got $5 billion in liquid assets that's just sitting there, 18 million is honestly nothing. You won't even feel it. You won't even notice, like, $18 million. Like, they give their executives $150 million. Like, and just, I mean, in further comparison, in 2019... Bobby made, I think it was like 35. He made like $35 million. And then in 2020, it's 155. And on top of that, he still can get up like another like $2 billion in bonuses on top of that compensation. It's just, oh boy, And Longshot in chat is even going through and saying they might actually not even owe anything. Their insurance will probably cover that. I mean, in those instances, their insurance rate might go up, but how many years is it going to take for them to actually have to, end up, eating that cost if insurance is covering it? It's... it just gets better and better every day, doesn't it? Though, these ones are for, the SEC stuff is for something completely different, because that's focusing just on, like the compensation and stuff like that. Well, I guess not entirely different of the topic we were just discussing, but like compensation as well as like the severance packages that the senior level executives were getting. That might have something to do with, things such as like, potential like high level people that were going through and getting let go amid like some of these allegations, and like, well, you fired these people because they're sexually, abusing their staff, did they get a golden parachute? What was their exit bonus? Could be. We don't really know. That one's going to come out later. And then the EEOC is a more like grand, not just Blizzard, but all of Activision itself. But yeah, there's your updates. Ooh. Yeah, before we go through and jump into the Diablo 2 stuff, as far as like the Diablo 3 and Diablo Immortal, got nothing. Still no PTR, still no updates on when any Diablo Immortal updates or anything is going to be going through and coming. I am expecting like an announcement of the Diablo 3 PTR like within the next couple of weeks. Just because we're at that point in the season, and so it's going to be sometime around now. We should probably be hearing something about D3. Diablo Immortal, I'm not sure, since the release got pushed back to next year. We saw the very first Diablo alpha, the week after Christmas, so we could see it sometime around there, or the week before Christmas that went all the way to like New Year's. So that's something that could potentially happen. Maybe we'll get something around in that December area, or we'll get something around like early January. It's all speculation at this point. If it was still on its original timetable, I guess I would have expected that we would be in the next one. If it was going to launch, say in like December, we'd be in it by now. But since they're going and like adding in controller support, we still haven't tested the Necromancer, so we still have that one class. And I'm pretty sure I talked about this on many episodes ago during the last alpha that we would probably be going to hell. Like it lays it all out in the story that you've got to go into hell to find like the World Stone Shard that Skarn had went through and picked up. So I'm pretty sure that's like what it's going to be going there. But yeah, no news. And so yeah, the big story going through and surrounding the Diablo community, as of last week, is of course the finally the launch of Diablo 2 Resurrected, and it wasn't that bad. There were definitely some issues. It wasn't as bad as Diablo 3's launch, and I honestly can't really compare it to Reaper of Souls launch because I didn't play on launch day. I didn't actually get a chance to play that until like the day after, and things had kind of like settled. But I want to say that like Reaper of Souls was a pretty like solid launch in terms of how things go for Diablo. But I mean, this was definitely leagues better than what like the Shadowlands launch was, because I was at least able to get into the game, though many people weren't. There were a lot of problems on launch day for people who were initially able to get into the game but were later disconnected and then unable to then join games or create characters. Characters were seemingly getting deleted, like your character just was disappearing, from your character select screen. And there have been numerous amount of hot fixes, server restarts, there's server patches and such, over the last few days in order to go through and get the game up to a level of performance that we would expect. In order to have that stable level of play. And it's at least hats off to the team for going through and staying committed through the whole weekend and patching stuff early Sunday morning and everything like that. So at least it's good that they're going through and dedicating to that. Though I always have to wonder that Blizzard always seems to be caught off guard by the sheer amount of people that want to go through and play their games. It's like one of those ones that's consistent. And I do have a tip of advice. I have one tip of advice, and this comes from someone in game development. I'm no game developer or anything like that, but it's from someone that was in game development, has a lot of experience, particularly with Diablo. And so I want to quote former game director Jay Wilson: double it. So, it's just like, take your expectations and then just increase them, because this happens like every single World of Warcraft launch. It happened with D2R. Wasn't quite as bad with D2R, but I used to years ago talk about how, it makes sense. You can have a rough launch weekend or a rough launch week because, server space is expensive. Going through and getting servers and all that stuff, that's very costly investments for, a week, 2 weeks, until like a gameplay stabilizes and the servers can handle the load, because not every single person in the entire fandom or community is wanting to play at that exact moment. And then it gives you time. You can kind of see what your play level is like, and you can maybe add on like 1 or 2 servers or something like that. But nowadays with like cloud computing, and the majority of like all like server-based architecture is mostly like virtual, and you're not really having to go through and dedicate and purchase your own hardware. That you can just like spin up virtual machines, and rent server space. Because compared to when like Reaper of Souls launched, like the cloud computing didn't really exist. It was in its infancy, back in like 2014, 2012. But nowadays it's just like, how are you, not doing that? And so it just, I don't know. It seems that there's a much better like cost ratio, that there should be available to make it so that way people are going through and having a flawless launch. And I'm just gonna like, brief case in point. New World launched yesterday, and it had its own share of like server problems and such, but from what it seemed, they were continuing to go through and at least like spin up like new servers so that way they could handle the capacity, and that the only thing that was going through and gating them was like the authentication method. And so people were spending like a couple hours in queue waiting to get into the game, but once they finally got into the game, it was nothing but mostly across the board, flawless gameplay and gameplay experiences. Very few issues going and playing the game outside of just being able to log into the game. And that, got alleviated more and more as the day went on, until eventually kind of like everyone was able to go through and get in. There was some emergency maintenance, last night and such on that game. I'm not playing it. This is just stuff that I'm being told from a couple of my friends that are like really hardcore into this game right now, and it seems interesting, but I don't have time for an MMO anymore, honestly. So it's not something that I've been following. But it's Amazon, AWS and all of that. They've got ton of cloud computing and virtual server space and such, and so it's like it's not like ATVI is hurting for money. It's something that they can go through and invest in. Just hit that buy button, rent out some server space for a week or two in order to go and try and alleviate some of that issues. Obviously, I'm speaking of this from a point of ignorance. I don't actually know what caused those issues for Diablo. Maybe it was something with just like too many people going through and getting on there. It is a 20-year-old game, and the majority of it is still like original coding, and it's been built into this beast in order to run on modern systems with modern graphics, and work with like modern, I'm gonna finger quote that one, modern game server architecture, because man, chat in the original Diablo 2 was, not the best, but I want to say the chat interface in Diablo 2 is better than the chat interface in D2R. It's not good. It's not good. If there was one thing that I would change about the game so far, it would definitely be, please, you need to get better, better social and communication aspects in that aspect of the game. But yeah, the rest of it, I mean, the game was amazing. I talked about this like during the alpha, during the closed beta, but it impresses me. The fidelity of the graphics, the gameplay was just as I remember it, and I'll talk a bit more on that one in a little bit. But I didn't have too many issues going through and playing the game over the weekend. I had a couple of like little disconnect bugs, not being able to create or join games. Some of my other friends had much worse issues. Some of my other friends had like 0 issues whatsoever. But as like just a common theme, by like Saturday night, Sunday, pretty much all of those issues were gone, and people were able to play the game pretty well. And that there were only a few kind of like separate cases. But for the most part, by Sunday, most people were able to play the game with very minimal issues. besides some of the jank that is 20-year-old game design. Going through and getting attacked by a Moon Lord, in the Glacial Trail, and you run away, and it's not lag. It's not lag, but you keep getting hit by him, and you're half a screen away, because it's just taking time for all of his attacks to register against you. But it's just like some weird stuff. And that's just like the aspect of the game, and that's where it's like I wanted to say, it's exactly as I remember it, because it was something that I guess playing in like the beta and such, and just having that initial shock value of like the graphics and the level of like loving care and detail that they put into it, and like all weekend. I guess that they lifted the NDA or whatever it was, but a whole bunch of artists, both at Blizzard and the freelance artists that were brought in order to work on the game, have been sharing like this is like the character I animated in one of the cutscenes. This is my model for Diablo that I made for this cutscene, or these are the monsters that I crafted and such. It's just been cool. I've been trying to like retweet and share as much of them as I've come across, but it's really cool seeing all of like these like really detailed models, which even in the new game you're still like that isometric view, you don't get as good of a look at, but being able to see them like in their full detail with like not like the in-game lighting and such, and it's just like really impressive how these models came to life. It's perfect. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But going and getting into those later acts began to show some of the aged game mechanics, that just, there's nothing wrong with it because it's exactly as it was 20 years ago, but maybe, not as good of a gameplay experience as I had thought it would be, namely stuff like the Moon Lords or Gloams and such in Act 3. So there were definitely some things that were having problems. It's like it seems that the fire enchant bug in Nightmare is still there, so it can just randomly do 1 million damage and just one shot anything, regardless of how much health or fire resist that you have. So there's little jank things in there and such, but mostly for the most part, had an absolute blast. Loved it. I didn't get to dedicate as much time to the game as I had wanted because, like I said, I had a couple of those server problems. I wasn't able to take time off of work. I had vendor visits and all this other types of stuff, so I was limited Thursday and Friday to only playing in the evenings. Saturday I put a lot of play into, but then Saturday night I ended up having an emergency call into work, and I still had to prep and do some work for my Age of Sigmar tournament that I had on Sunday, and then all day Sunday, I was down in Plantation, going and playing Warhammer and such. But it is one of those that I can see myself going and just maybe slow rolling it for the rest of the week, and then this weekend isn't any better. I've got yesterday I played in a 40k league. Saturday I have another 40k league game. Saturday night, Neve's family is coming back from Ireland that we have to go through and pick up. Sunday, a friend is getting married, and so we're going to the wedding and all other types of stuff. So maybe in 2 weeks, I'll be able to sit down and dedicate a whole day to nothing but Diablo. But we'll see. But at the end, it's it's not a season, so it's not as much that pressure to get in there and try and get one of those top 100 spots. But I'm honestly having a blast with my my boner necro. Loving it. It's even better than what I remembered. Just getting all those talent points and just getting it to the point where you shoot out the bone spear and then just everything dies. You got a tier rune for the mana on kill, and so your mana just refills itself whenever you get into one of those big tightly packed corridors in Act 2, not the maggot layer, but just going through the tombs and such, doing a tomb run or something, and just killing 20 mobs with one spear and just filling your mana right back. It's almost as good as a potion. But yeah, I can't wait till I start getting to the end game and getting some of the set pieces and such. I already talked about wanting to do a rift kicker. So a riftison is probably one of the next things I have on my list. I just got to find like a 5-socketed flail and a whole bunch of like mid-level runes, and then maybe going through and trying to do like a poison necro if I manage to trade for a death's web, because I will never find one in the game itself. That's just impossible. I cannot dedicate my life to Diablo 2, unfortunately. I know I'm disappointing people, but it is it's still cool. It's fun. And then also, I think I talked about this on the last episode, but I just want to reiterate it. One of the things that I've been going through and coming out with some of the developer discussions that have been out there is they're now starting to go through and kind of like they're floating that question where it's like, well, what's next? What's next for the team? And the devs are like, well, we're, before, like, after the game was announced, they're like, well, is there any plans to maybe go beyond what was the scope of Lord of Destruction? It's like, our focus right now is to just work on the game and get it out. But now the conversation is like, well, we're open to feedback on changes or content updates that they might want for D2R. It's it's going to be one of those ones. It's Diablo 2 Resurrected is digital only. There's no physical sales of the game, so it's going to be very difficult with which to track any type of sales data for it. So we're going to have like no idea how well the game sold unless Blizzard is willing to go through and share that information. But I have to assume that it's doing very well, and that would kind of spurn Blizzard on to, well, maybe we should do a bit more. Now, I want to say I am biased. I do follow the majority of like the Diablo content creator community. I got my finger on the pulse as far as like Diablo news goes. My Twitter feed is like pretty much finely crafted, and it kind of shows me some various gaming stuff, like a little bit of generic gaming stuff, a lot of Diablo and a lot of Warhammer, not much outside of that particular window. That I've created a nice little like comfort zone for my online social media experience, which I highly recommend. Please curate your lists, go through, add and utilize block words, mute words, block accounts for things that you don't want to see. It will do wonders for your mental health. Trust me, it works. It's I saw like some of the response from like, obviously there's a lot of bad response for Warcraft 3 Reforged, but there's a lot of good response for StarCraft Remastered, and that was like seemed to have been well received and did well, at least financially. And I see so much more. Like, there's so much more going on about talk with Diablo 2 Resurrected. Just seeing its placement on Twitch, continually day after day, that it's just like going up there and shooting numbers. It seems like such a done deal for them to want to go through and do something else for D2. Whether it be taking a nod from Diablo 3 or Path of Exile and doing some sort of like themed seasons, or sorry, ladders, that's the appropriate term for this game, or even just like going and doing what they had done for years after kind of like 1.9, 1.10, like the last kind of like big content patches that they had for the game. They still was a couple of times that they went and added in, oh, well, here's like a new helmet or something, that they added, or a new rune word. They just kind of like drop into the game. There's lots of potential there for them to go like, oh, for this ladder we're adding a new rune word. You're not adding any new items. You're just using the pre-existing stuff. And just giving it a new combination. You can do higher level ones, lower level ones. You can do it new sets, new items and such in order to diversify builds. So there's a lot that they can do from just like even just like a tinier aspect than what would go into developing a new class or crafting a new zone. But those are two things I would also like to see for Diablo 2 Resurrected. I'm sure they talked. Vicarious Visions went to such great lengths talking about how much they went through all of the prior documentation and every little tiny bit and detail that they could from the original design documents of Diablo 2, the concept art, notes of the developers, all this stuff. David Brevik has talked about how there was some talks and some initial exploration into a second expansion for Diablo 2 before it was scrapped, and they went to work on their version of Diablo 3. And he talked about there was some concepts of making a cleric class. It seems as if it wasn't that far, so there's not a lot of code or anything like that, if there ever was even anything besides, the rough sketches and some, drawing board level design talks. But that could be at least an avenue that they could start to build, build off of that. There's some building blocks. There's a little bit of a foundation that's been laid for that particular class. Yeah, not sure. There's a lot that they could do as far as like an additional act or a continued story. You do that begins to run into the issue of Diablo Immortal exists within a set time frame, and because there's you're dealing with just like 5 years after the events of Diablo 2 is when Immortal takes place. And so, you don't want to step too much on like the toes as far as the story goes between that. But there is at least like little things that they could, touch upon. And I feel, that would be cool. Obviously, they're not going to be able to get to it in time for Diablo Immortal to launch next year. But what would it be cool if they did like an act like 5.5? Maybe a story that takes you to all of the different zones that you now have to find like a shard of the World Stone and some boss that is been like a new zone. So say like you have to go back to Act 1 and now there's like a crater from one of the shards that is branched off of the Cold Plains, and it's a new like higher level zone where everything is like monster level 99 or something, and a brand new boss or enemy that you have to go through and kill there, and then the same in Act 2 and 3, yada yada, that you have to go through and farm and kill, and almost like a more of an easier transition into the story of Diablo Immortal, where you kind of like have those kind of like just like breadcrumbs leading into that story. That's just me thinking kind of like off the cuff. There's things that that they can do. There's a lot of potential there. I would honestly love to see it, because just think about it. You go through and you got a ladder for D2. You're going to go through, play that. Oh, there's a new content update for Diablo 2 Resurrected. Let me check that. And then there's a new season for Diablo 3. So let me go through, check out whatever the new theme is. Ethereal's 2.0. And then you also have like, and then there's a new new ladder season that launches for Diablo Immortal. Let me go and check out what that new Paragon tree is. And then there could be like this nice like cool like interweaving level of content that you're getting, where it's all Diablo but it's different games that you're getting it from. And so it's a little thing that you can spend all of your time playing just brand new Diablo content to your heart's content, like every month or two, but it's just from a different game. Obviously, people are gonna, there will be some people that like that. They like to hop from game to game. That they'll play through the seasonal journey. They'll play around on like the Diablo 2 ladder until like they get to like level 90 or something. They just not a huge dedication of time, but at least like a little bit that they feel that they can complete their build. Play around with some stuff, get some high level runes, make a rune word or something. And then of course with Diablo Immortal, we know that there's not going to be like a traditional like ladder or season reset from what they've told us, but it'll be more just when they do a new season, there'll be a new Paragon tree added, and so they'll raise the Paragon cap, and you can go and now gain like 100 more levels or 50 more levels or however many levels are in that particular tree, to then max that out and see whatever like new content or new class that they implement. So there's always going to be, we're setting up ourselves to be having like the opposite. We're going to have a content flood of Diablo related stuff, next year. We're going to have 3 actively developed Diablo games that we can jump to at any given point in time. Next year, and that's also barring that Diablo 4 doesn't launch next year. Spoilers, I'm doubtful it will, but we'll see. I'll amend that once we ever have our BlizzCon Online 2022, BlizzCon Online 2. I don't know what they're going with the naming on this one, because it was like when they announced that BlizzCon wasn't going to happen this year and that they would fill in with another like online event like early next year. I felt as if that was like the perfect opportunity for them to go through and be like, oh yeah, BlizzCon 2 is coming next year, or BlizzCon Line 2022 is coming early next year. But it was just like, we're doing an online event. It's like, you didn't get rid of the copy guy, did you? Someone has to come up with something better than that for a press release. Come on now. But yeah, we'll see. Well, I mean, my expectation is, so at least for Diablo 4, that with the next BlizzCon stand-in, we'll get the final class. But if they don't start talking about the beta, then it's not happening next year. And so we'll wait and see. But while we're on the topic of Diablo 4, we did get a confirmation from the community manager, Pez Adam, that he went and said that the Diablo 4 systems blog is actually going to come next week. It is going to be, in October, but we're going to be getting it next week. I believe the previous ones have all launched on a Wednesday or Thursday. And so probably it's going to be sometime midweek. And, as I've said before, for any time that they go through and they launch a D4 development blog, I will record a kind of like a fill-in episode to cover that the day it goes live. So just keep an eye out for that, and I will go and record something. And especially, I'm very interested in this one because he said that it's going to be about audio design and to get your ears ready. And that is just, forgive the term, music to my ears. Because music is such an important part of the Diablo experience to me. I play the game with music on. I know that's very weird, but I do it. I enjoy the audio design, the level of dedication that they put into making the game. It's one of those things that, especially like in D3, no, not trying to rag on Diablo 2, but it's a 20-year-old game. But with Diablo 3, like the sound design, if you just like turn off the music and up the sound effects and then just like listen to a skeleton walk around, like there is a lot of love that went into making the entire audio profile for all of those minions and skills and such, that really makes like kind of like a fleshed out experience. And then, well, I mean, if you've been listening to the podcast, I love the Diablo 2 music because it's in the background of every single episode. It's in the background of every time that I stream, whether it be Diablo 3 or Diablo 2R or what have you. I'm always listening to it. It is 100% my most listened to soundtrack on iTunes. And I was talking about sound design when I was streaming Diablo 2 over the weekend, because it's so cool. And it's just like everything that we're listening to right now is just amazing when you think about it, because like the majority of all of it is like samples. It's not even, like actual like recorded music. It's just sample tracks spliced together, and just how much of a genius Matt Uelman is when it comes to music. That certain sounds like this stay with you for literal decades, and that they can just invoke feelings and images. You go through and you hear desert, and all of a sudden just like those desert and cat people and undead buzzards and such all vividly come to mind. You hear like ice caves, and it's either Act 5 or just the loading screen for Lord of Destruction in general, since that was one of the very first songs that played when you load into like the BattleNet lobby. There's just so much stuff that is just really, really impactful when it comes to the sound and music of the Diablo franchise. It was one of my biggest complaints when Diablo 3 originally released, was because very few of the songs were memorable, and the couple that were like coincided with cutscenes and not stuff that, like, Wilderness and Desert are like two of my like favorite tracks in all of Diablo 2. Leviathan, what's going on, man? Is going through and just like I'm talking about this, and he drops Toru, you know, the sound of Luke Ghislaine and such. And so like those there's things that you go through and you remember, and you can visualize that entire zone just listening to that music. And it's really hard to do that with Diablo 3, because in Diablo 3 the music was just, I'm sorry, I know if you're a long-time listener, I have done this rant many times, but I'm doing it again. That in Diablo 3 it's just background. The music is just a part of the background, and it's almost like it was designed that you could just hit that mute button and play your own soundtrack, and the game was just developed with that process at the forefront. But with Diablo 2, again, it is, you know, from a different era of game development. The music was meant to be part of the experience. And God, I hope that is the level that they take with Diablo 4. I am at least a bit confident in that, because Reaper of Souls did a tremendous amount for Diablo 3 in terms of not sound design, but music, the music composition. You know, because Diablo 3 or Reaper of Souls had some memorable tracks to it. You know, like the burning of Westmarch, Malthael, and such. And so there's some things that you can hear and know exactly that, oh, that's Pandemonium Fortress. That's the Malthael fight. You know, you can hear those, and you can actually pick out the zone. It wasn't the entirety of everything, but Reaper of Souls definitely took the Diablo 3 kind of like music direction back towards how it was handled in Diablo 2. And I really, really hope that is what they go back to of Diablo 4. And I'm really looking forward. I absolutely loved the last development update that we had in terms of like the art, and getting to see like the character models, the spider puppet, all that lovely, disgusting stuff that we saw that tickled my fancy so much. And I'm expecting to be blown away even more now that we know that it's going to be music that they're talking about in the next dev blog. You know, I can understand that there's some people that have had the reaction of, well, you know, that's great and all, but I want to know some like hardcore facts about the game. And, you know, I understand. I get that. I too, I want to know more about like what's the current iteration of like skill design and itemization and such. You know, but I also do appreciate, you know, the fluffier topics, more abstract stuff. But maybe if they were to go through and kind of like flip it, you know, do like a hardcore numbers nitty gritty. Here's like some itemization details and such. Here's a new system that's in development. Here's like a revamped druid speciality, or the barbarian. We retooled the barbarian system. You know, and then like the next one is like, you know, here's some more, and we did like the character artwork and such, but here's, you know, kind of more like dungeon design or set design, like how we develop the zones and the level of detail that goes into all the doodads and such. And here's like maybe some of the tech that we're using for, you know, the random creation of the dungeons and such. And then, you know, after that, then they go like, and well, here's another one about itemization or a brand new in-game system or something. Here's what we're working on for like key dungeons, you know. And they're just like leapfrog it, right? And, you know, that way, you know, you're hitting a bunch of notes, because things like, look at everyone was talking about the character design when they said there was going to be about like character art and such, that, oh, this is lame. This is lame. We want to know about numbers and such. And then the blog came out, and everyone was like, wow, that's some awesome stuff. So I think that those, you know, kind of quote-unquote fluff pieces are actually like really impactful. And those are the types of things that actually maybe apply more to the majority of the player base, where, you know, you and I, if you're listening to a Diablo podcast, you're a step above the general audience of the game, because you're that much involved in the Diablo community that you're wanting to learn more. And especially at the point, if you're listening to me talk about Diablo, then man, you're dedicated, that's for certain. But you know, the standard person, Diablo 3 sold like, the last official number was it sold like 30 million copies, 6 years ago. The Light knows how many copies it sold by now, especially with like the subsequent like Switch releases and everything. It's I wish that we would get some sales data. Is it what, 50, 60 million copies? There's a lot of copies of Diablo 3 out there, and so there's a lot of people that play Diablo 3 occasionally, and those people probably don't care about set balance. Those 30 million soulless faces out there in the wild, they really don't care whether one class is better than the other. They don't really give a crap that they tweak to the numbers on XYZ. They're picking the class that looks cool. They're using the skill that's like flashy or they have fun with, or it's like, I'm building a Chakram Demon Hunter because that's the skill that I use to level, and I just don't know any better to change that out. I'm using this skill because I still have, what is it? I still have the default skill system on in D3. I can't put on, 2 archery skills for the Demon Hunter. Those are the types of people that you're talking about, and to those people, things like the character art, music, and such are probably a lot more important than the in-game systems and the skills. With the caveat that the overall gameplay experience is, of course, the most important aspect, and so things such as skill design, character balance, itemization, and such will heavily factor into that. But the thing that's going to get them into the game and keeping them playing, is some of the fluffier, less impactful aspects. I think that's something that we maybe have to remind ourselves every once in a while, that there are other people that play the game, and they play the game for other reasons besides the same that we do. And, well, that kind of brings us to the end of the Diablo coverage for these past couple of weeks. I do look forward to going through and chatting with you all next week, since we do have the confirmation that there will be the development blog update coming next week. Because of some of the work activities, it might be later on in the evening. It might even be like a midday stream, depending upon when it goes live and my work schedule and such. But I'll, again, just keep an eye over at Twitter, which, if you want to follow the show, drop a follow over at the WM Workshop on Twitter, or you can follow myself at 9ballgamer on Twitter, in order to know when the next episode's going to be, when I'm going to go live. Also, if you I like tweeting and talking about all things Diablo and Warhammer and some general gaming stuff, as well as I will forever be on the side of the employees over at Blizzard, and will always forever challenge Blizzard to do better by their employees, and I hope for a better work experience for them. But if you have any questions, comments, or feedback for the show, please feel free to drop me an email over at westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. And again, that email is westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. And the show itself, you can follow over at twitch.tv/blizzpro. We record the episode live. I say we, I mean I, every other Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Though for the next couple of months, because of work activities, might be moved to a Westmarch Thursdays, but I'll keep you up to date on as that goes. For those of you that are going through and watching on YouTube, or the all of those that are listening on iTunes, Stitcher, whatever, again, thank you for going through and finding it. And if you want to, you can listen to the show. Again, it's on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, your podcasting platform of choice. But with that, I wish you all a good evening and best of luck in Sanctuary, and I look forward to chatting with you next week.